What if I told you the worst year in history was not caused by nature, not by an earthquake, not by a disease, but by humans? And what if I told you that the same forces that destroyed millions of lives back then are still alive today? Stay with me, because history is about to repeat itself. Welcome to part 2 of the worst days of the centuries. We won't take too much of your time. Let's go to the 11th century. In the last year of this century, the year 1099 AD, the First Crusade begins, when European Christians march toward Jerusalem. They enter the city and kill thousands of Muslims and Jews. They take over the entire city and turn Al-Aqsa Mosque into a Christian palace. This is the beginning of the Crusades, which continue for centuries, and maybe they're still continuing even now. Point 3. Religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, all claim this city. Let's go to the 12th century. In the 7th year of this century's disasters, the year 1177, Baldwin IV, the king of Jerusalem, manages to defeat Saladin, the Muslim commander, forcing the Muslims to retreat. In this same century, in the year 1138 AD, a massive earthquake strikes Aleppo, in what is now Syria. It's said that more than 200,000 people are killed. The 13th century, the century of Genghis Khan. Wherever you look, the Mongols are there. The worst year of this century is 1258 AD, when the Mongols enter Baghdad, and completely burn and destroy this extraordinary city, a city filled with the knowledge of its time. If you've seen the video about the greatest city in history, you know how important Baghdad was. This disaster was catastrophic for science and knowledge, because after Baghdad was destroyed, the science, knowledge, and technology that had made West Asia the world's leader were wiped out, and West Asia never again reached that level of glory, at least in terms of science, knowledge, and technology. Let's go to the 14th century, the year 1347 AD, one of the deadliest years in history, known as the Year of the Black Death. The Black Death was caused by bacteria that lived on fleas. And where did those fleas live? Mostly on rats and field mice. Who could have eliminated those infected rats? Cats. So where were the cats? By decree of Pope Gregory IX, all cats were ordered to be killed. He declared that the Black Death came from cats. Cats were killed, rats multiplied, and the disease multiplied with them. Some people say, don't exaggerate, but believe it or not, I have to say this. The plague killed 200 million people. So the gold medal of massacre goes to Pope Gregory IX. Of course, they didn't give medals back then, but he caused it. Let's go to the 15th century. The year is 1453 AD. Sultan Mehmed II successfully enters Constantinople. This event is extremely important because it changes the course of history. The most important Christian city falls into Muslim hands. One major change in the world was this. By taking Constantinople, the Ottomans cut the connection between East and West. The Silk Road begins to decline. This separation causes East and West to grow completely apart. Knowledge and technology stop flowing between them. That's why, after a few centuries, the West advances rapidly, while the East stagnates. Even the Industrial Revolution never truly reached the Ottoman Empire, let alone the rest of the East. Let's go to the 16th century, a century known as the century of smallpox. Smallpox is brought by Europeans to the New World, North and South America, and it decimates the native populations. Their bodies had never encountered such a disease, and they couldn't resist it. It said that the population of Native Americans was far larger than we imagine, but smallpox wiped them out. Millions died this way. Not that Europeans didn't kill them, they did, but most of the killing was done by smallpox. Some Spanish sailors wrote about the city of Tenochtitlan, located in modern-day Mexico, then part of the Aztec Empire. They wrote that the first time they arrived, the region was full of people, but the next time they returned, in 1521, they encountered a city of ghosts. You could barely find natives, and if you did, they were young men, meaning 90% of the native population had been killed. 10% remained, and 9% of that were killed by Europeans. Only 1% survives to this day. At the time, Europeans didn't know why this was happening. Today we know. It was smallpox that we brought and that killed them. Europeans had developed immunity, but their bodies had never seen such a disease before, so they fell like autumn leaves. A painful century. Let's go to the 17th century, the year 1644. We return to China. The Ming dynasty collapses, and, as usual, endless internal wars begin. Wars that leave millions dead. This war is considered a relatively small civil war for China, because the new dynasty quickly gains control and eliminates the warlords. But don't think the death toll was low. Even though it ended quickly, millions were killed. You should know that China, even back then, was the most populous country in the world, around 200 million people, millions killing each other. That's considered low casualties for China. We'll get to the high numbers later. Let's go to the 18th century, the year 1783. The El Niño phenomenon, which also has its own video, causes a severe drought in India and Europe, but India suffers far worse. Agriculture collapses, and a massive population is left starving. 11 million Hindus die, but Indian Muslims survive. Why? Because they ate meat. They slaughtered cattle and sheep. Hindus refused to eat meat. They preferred to die of hunger rather than violate their religion. That's why 11 million died. Let's go to the 19th century, the year 1815. The Earth plays another trick. The Tambora volcano in Indonesia erupts. Tambora throws so much ash into the sky that dark clouds cover the planet. For 18 months, sunlight cannot reach the Earth. Agriculture shuts down, and millions of people die of starvation. Across the entire world, another disaster in this century. The second deadliest war in human history, where, in China, the Taiping Rebellion, from 1850 to 1864, the most horrifying civil war in China. Killing 30 million people. We say numbers and move on. 30 million, 20 million, 10 million. 1 million. These are people. 1 death in our neighborhood is a tragedy. The whole neighborhood collapses. Imagine massacres like this. We remember that famous quote, often falsely attributed to Stalin. 1 death is a tragedy. 10 million deaths is a statistic. Let's go to the previous century, the century many of us were born in, including me. I was born in 1918. Just kidding. One of the worst years of the 20th century is 1918. World War I ends, leaving more than 20 million dead. Music. What makes this century even worse? The outbreak of the Spanish flu. Don't think it was a normal flu. It was a killing machine. It said the Spanish flu killed 50 million people. Meanwhile, the Bolsheviks win. A civil war erupts in Russia. The Treaty of Versailles is signed. Germany is crushed, and a Holocaust occurs in Iran. Food supplies are limited to feed British soldiers in the south and Russian and Ottoman soldiers in the north. The Iranian people are left starving, causing 7 to 10 million innocent people die of hunger. What a horrifying century. And it's just the beginning. In 1930, a depression begins. The Great Depression. It sends the world into a coma. By 1939, World War II begins. The same Germany that was crushed at Versailles rises again, and starts another war. A war that lasts 6 years, and ends with 2 atomic bombs. World War II becomes the deadliest war in history, with more than 70 million deaths, and the disasters don't stop. Korean War, Vietnam War, Iran-Iraq War, Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the Yugoslav civil wars, genocides in Africa, like Rwanda, and countless other tragedies. A century overflowing with death and misery. Please comment, what do you think was the worst year of the 20th century? Some say 1939, some say 1918, opinions differ. Let's go to the 21st century. Only 25 years have passed so in the first year, 2001, the September 11th attacks occur, changing the entire world, especially West Asia, the US invasion of Afghanistan, the US invasion of Iraq. These are the early years of the 21st century. In the 8th year, a global recession hits, the 2008 financial crisis, crippling the world economy, and in 2020, you know what happened, a global pandemic called COVID-19, the world shut down, and reopened it in a completely different way. Even though only 5 years have passed, the world completely changed. You can never compare before 2020 with after it. We hope the remaining 3/4 of the 21st century will be filled with humanity and kindness, and that people everywhere will live in peace. In short, well done, you just traveled through 200 years. History does not move forward in a straight line. It moves through pain, mistakes, fear, and power. When we look back, we see that the deadliest years were not caused by nature alone, but by human decisions, religion, ideology, greed, ignorance, and the hunger for control have killed far more people than earthquakes, diseases, or volcanoes. Every century believed it was different. Every generation thought it would do better. Yet the same patterns repeat: new weapons, old hatred, different names, same tragedies. The past is not dead. It lives inside the present, and the future is being written right now. The question is not what was the worst year in history. The real question is, have we learned anything, or are we just preparing the next one?